My name is Elise Grant, and I never imagined the next time I'd see my family would be at my father's funeral. I stood at the edge of the cemetery in full uniform, badge on my chest, gun at my hip, watching the people I once called home lower a man into the ground who never really saw me. The stares started the moment I stepped out of the car, quiet gasps, a few turned heads, my mother frozen on the steps like she wasn't sure whether to come hug me or pretend I didn't exist. I didn't wear this uniform to make a statement. I wore it because it's who I am now. And honestly, I didn't know how else to show up. I hadn't been home in over 6 years. Not since the night everything snapped for good. And I told myself if I ever did return, I'd do it as the woman I became, not the girl they left behind. People whispered as I walked past the rows of black dresses and navy suits. Some of them I remembered, uncles and cousins, neighbors who always asked about my brother and forgot I existed. No one knew what to say. I didn't blame them. I had spent most of my life invisible in this family. And today wasn't going to be the day that changed. I kept my face still, my steps even. It wasn't about making a scene, but there was no hiding who I was now. I'm a police officer. I've worn this badge through every kind of situation you can think of, but this, standing in front of a casket with my name echoing through hushed voices, this was different. They didn't expect me to come. And they definitely didn't expect me to come like this. But funerals have a funny way of bringing out the truth. And what none of them knew was that the real story hadn't even started yet. I was 8 when I stopped running. One minute, I was chasing my brother across the backyard, and the next, I was on the ground, screaming. A fall off the trampoline dislocated my hips so badly that the doctors said it would never fully heal, and they were right. After that, I walked with a noticeable limp. Not dramatic, just enough to remind everyone I wasn't quite right. My mother started finishing my sentences at school events, like she didn't trust me to represent the family properly, and my father, he mostly stopped looking at me altogether. My brother Ryan was everything I wasn't. Tall, athletic, charming, and terrifyingly confident for a teenager. He was a star pitcher, an honor roll student, and the kid who made the neighbors say, "That Grant boy is going places." My dad treated him like a trophy he'd won and needed to polish in front of the world. At dinner, conversations revolved around Ryan's games, Ryan's grades, and Ryan's latest achievement. When I got an A in history, my mom smiled like it was cute. When Ryan got a B, my dad had a full strategy session with him about focus and discipline. I learned pretty quickly that effort didn't matter unless it came with glory. There was a Christmas when I was 11. I had saved up money from tutoring a neighbor's kid and bought my dad a book on World War II aviation. He'd once told me it was his favorite topic. When he opened it, he nodded, thanked me, and then moved on to the leather jacket Ryan got him. He wore that jacket for years. The book stayed unopened on the shelf in his office. I started shrinking into myself around that time. I became quiet at the dinner table, careful not to take up space. My limp got worse when I was tired, and I'd catch my mom wincing when I walked in front of guests. Once, before a school talent show, she told me gently, "Maybe just let Ryan go up for both of you this year. You can support him from the audience." I nodded, even though it hurt more than the limp ever had. It wasn't that they were cruel. Not exactly. It was more like they had this vision of what a perfect family looked like, and I just didn't fit. My father used to joke that Ryan had his stride. When people pointed out my limp, he'd laugh and say, "She takes after her mother's side." We lived in a house full of awards and plaques. Ryan's trophies lined the walls like some museum exhibit. My room was quieter. No one ever asked what I liked or what I wanted to be. They assumed I'd stay in Ryan's shadow, grateful for the leftovers of attention and praise. When I started getting into books about law enforcement, it was just something I did in private. There was no moment when I told my parents I wanted to be a cop. I knew exactly how they'd react. My mom would frown and say something about how dangerous it sounded. My dad would probably remind me that being a cop required you to run, and we both knew how that would go. So I kept my dreams to myself. I watched how Ryan soaked in approval like sunlight while I stayed in the shade, growing inward. There were no birthday speeches for me. No lectures about potential. Just a quiet kind of dismissal that, over time, felt louder than yelling ever could. By high school, I had stopped trying. I smiled at the right moments, kept my grades up, and made sure not to limp too noticeably when company was over. I wasn't angry, at least not then. I just thought this was how families worked. Some people shine. Some people stand quietly in the audience, clapping. I applied to the police academy the week after my college graduation. No one in my family knew. I'd been saving the application fee for months, taking extra shifts at the bookstore, researching training requirements at night while pretending to study for grad school. The physical standards were brutal. Running, timed obstacle courses, and strength tests. Every advisor I spoke to said the same thing, kindly but firmly. You might want to consider something in forensic analysis or dispatch. That was code for, your body isn't built for this. I didn't argue. I just trained. I ran every morning before sunrise, timing my limp, learning how to shift weight and use the stronger side of my body for momentum. I found old YouTube videos of athletes with injuries and studied their form like gospel. I iced my hips so often that my skin turned red and raw. I failed the first running test by 9 seconds. I failed the second by 4. But I showed up again. I adjusted my breathing, shortened my stride on the uphill, and focused on power during the sprint. On the third attempt, I passed. Barely, but it counted. I cried in the locker room, not from joy, but from release. No one was waiting for me outside. My mom didn't call. My dad didn't even know I was applying. I left a voicemail for Ryan, and he texted back, "Wow, that's intense. Congrats, I guess." The academy itself was a war zone. Long days, harder nights. My instructors kept pushing, and so did I. Some cadets avoided me at first, assuming I couldn't keep up. But week after week, I proved them wrong. I wasn't the strongest, but I was the last one to give up. When graduation day came, they handed me my badge in front of the entire class. My name was called. Applause rang out. I looked into the crowd and saw rows of strangers' families clapping and hugging. My row was empty. No balloons, no bouquet, just me. Later that night, I sent a photo of myself in uniform to the family group chat. My mom left it on read. My dad never responded. Ryan texted back a thumbs-up emoji. I stared at that little symbol for a long time and then turned off my phone. But something shifted that day. I stopped waiting for someone else to name my worth. I had earned that badge with every blister, every limp. Every morning I dragged myself out of bed when no one believed in me. I didn't need their approval. I needed the work. I started patrolling the streets of a neighborhood that reminded me of where I grew up. I wasn't naive. I knew what people saw when they looked at me. A small woman with a limp didn't exactly scream authority. But that worked in my favor more often than not. They underestimated me, until they didn't. Until I made an arrest, calmed down a domestic dispute, or chased down someone who thought I couldn't run. I kept my head down, did the job, and rose through the ranks. Each promotion was quiet. No celebration dinners, no proud phone calls home. But I kept going. Not because they pushed me, but because they didn't. They chose distance. I chose duty. And I never looked back. The call came on a Tuesday. I was at my desk, reviewing a case file, halfway through a cold cup of coffee. My phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over 2 years. Mom. Just that. No contact photo. No warmth. Just the title I never deleted. I didn't pick up right away. Let it ring, watching the screen like it might say something different if I stared long enough. When it went to voicemail, I put the phone face down and tried to get back to work. But I couldn't stop hearing her voice in my head, the way it used to sound when she was annoyed, or worse, disappointed. 10 minutes later, I listened to the message. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. Elise, it's your father. He passed this morning. The service is on Saturday. A pause, like she didn't know what else to say. Then, I hope you'll come. That was it. Not, I want you there. Not, We need you. Just hope. I sat there for a long time, not crying, just still. The kind of still where your thoughts can't even line up. My father was gone. The man who used to look past me at dinner. The man who forgot birthdays, who once introduced me to a colleague as the quiet one. I didn't know how to feel, or if I was supposed to feel anything at all. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Delete the message. Move on. Treat it like every other family moment I'd been left out of. But another part of me, the smaller part that still remembered being 9 and hoping for a proud smile, wouldn't let it go. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't owe them anything. But the truth is, funerals aren't just about saying goodbye to the dead. Sometimes, they're about facing the living, the ones who watched you disappear and never asked why. So I booked the flight. I pulled my dress blues out of the back of my closet and laid them across the bed. I hadn't worn the full uniform in months. As I polished my badge, I realized I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for me. I needed them to see who I had become. Not the girl they dismissed. Not the sister they forgot. But the woman who built a life without them. I didn't know what would happen when I walked through those church doors, but I knew I wouldn't walk in as anyone but myself. And that, finally, would be enough. I stepped up to the podium, my hands gripping the edges so tightly, I could feel my knuckles turn white. The room was quiet, except for the soft shuffle of tissue boxes and the faint hum of air conditioning. I cleared my throat and began, not with the polished speech I had rehearsed, but with the words that had been inside me for years, unspoken. "I'm Elise Grant," I said, my voice steady, though my heart thumped in my chest. I was my father's daughter, though I'm not sure he always knew it. I learned a lot from him, some of it good, some of it hard, and most of it taught me how to survive on my own. The words felt heavy, each one a mix of grief and honesty, and I could see a few eyes glisten with tears, while others remained distant, like mine had been for so long. I finished the eulogy and stepped back, thinking I had done my part, that I had finally spoken my truth in a room full of people who never heard it. Then the lawyer cleared his throat, and everyone turned toward him. He held a sealed envelope and a thick document in his hands and said, "Before we proceed, your father left a letter addressed to Elise and made changes to his will that require immediate attention." A hush fell over the room. My stomach dropped, and I felt the familiar pulse of anxiety mix with curiosity. I didn't move. The envelope seemed heavier than it should have been, as if it carried every unspoken word between us. My fingers itched to open it, but I waited, knowing that what came next would change everything. I carefully broke the seal on the envelope, my hands trembling as I unfolded the paper inside. The letter was in my father's handwriting, uneven and shakily penned, like he had labored over every word. Knowing he didn't have much time left. "Elise," it began, "I know I failed you in ways I cannot undo. I see now the life I overlooked, the courage I ignored, and I am sorry." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of years of absence and misunderstanding press down on me. The letter continued, explaining that he had changed his will before he died. Everything that was assumed to go to Ryan, including the family home and his investment accounts, was now designated for me. He wrote about his regrets, acknowledging how he had favored Ryan and dismissed my achievements. "I thought I was protecting you by expecting less, by letting you stay in the background. I was wrong, and I see it now too late. But I want you to know I tried, in my way, to make amends." My chest ached with a mixture of disbelief and relief. I could feel tears pricking the corners of my eyes as I realized the power of what he had left me wasn't just financial. It was recognition, validation of all the years I had struggled and succeeded on my own. The room was silent around me, everyone watching my reaction as I read the words again. Ryan's face had gone pale, confusion and shock written across his features, while my mother looked like she had seen a ghost. I folded the letter carefully, trying to process the mix of grief, anger, and the strange warmth of finally being seen. For the first time in decades, I felt a deep, trembling sense of closure. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't erase the past or heal every wound, But in that moment, I understood my father's attempt at redemption, and I knew I could carry it forward without needing anyone's permission or approval. The room felt heavy after the lawyer finished reading the will. Ryan's face was red with anger, his hands clenching at his sides, and I could hear the sharp intake of breath from relatives who had expected him to inherit everything. My mother's eyes darted between us, confusion and disbelief, making her hands shake as she clutched her purse. No one spoke for a long moment. I sat quietly, letting the weight of the revelation sink in. The air felt thick, like it had been holding its breath all these years, finally released in a single, unexpected truth. Then my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from a number labeled Dad, an audio file he had recorded days before passing. I pressed play, and his voice, soft and deliberate, filled the quiet room. Elise, I know I hurt you by not seeing you, by favoring Ryan and forgetting the person you were becoming. I'm leaving you what should have always been yours. Please understand that I finally saw you, and I am proud. I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. The sting of the past remained, but beneath it was a strange comfort, a thread of closure that had been missing for decades. Ryan stormed out, muttering about unfairness, but I didn't follow. For once, I didn't need to argue or justify my place. My mother stayed seated, silent, and for the first time, I noticed her vulnerability. She had never had to face the quiet strength I had built over the years. I realized then that this was more than a financial inheritance. It was a transfer of acknowledgement, of recognition that I had existed and endured. I leaned back, feeling the tension leave my shoulders in slow, uneven waves. The truth had caught up with all of us, but it was mine to hold now. I didn't have to forgive or forget. I only had to live knowing that, finally, I had been seen. I sat alone that evening, the house quiet around me, and let myself think through everything that had happened. The anger, the hurt, the shock, and finally the unexpected acknowledgement all settled into a calm I hadn't known I could feel. I realized that my worth had never been tied to their approval, and it never would be again. For years, I had measured myself against their expectations, hoping for a nod or a smile that rarely came. Now I saw clearly that the measure of my life wasn't in their recognition, but in the choices I made, the challenges I faced, and the people I became along the way. Each decision, each sacrifice, each triumph has built the person I am today. I thought about the long journey from the girl who limped across the backyard to the woman standing in her father's funeral home, unshaken and seen. Life hadn't been fair, but I had learned how to claim my own story. And in that moment, I understood fully. What defines us is not who accepts us, but who we choose to be.